already better than anything I can say in Russian. Okay? I worked all of my life in England. I worked for the British government. I worked for the government department which looks after the courts in England. So my job was to inspect the criminal, the civil and the family courts. I'm not a lawyer, I'm just a bureaucrat. Worked in an office. I like food and cooking. I like beer. I like pretty much any sport. I don't understand basketball. That's about the only one that I can't watch. But I love football. I love cricket. I love rugby, baseball, American football. I read a lot. I've read a lot all of my life. A lot of classic novels. I've read a lot of Russian novels, obviously in translation to English. So it's not quite the same, but I do know quite a bit about Russian literature and culture, and a lot about English literature and culture. I like rubbish books as well, so I like Harry Potter and Twilight and anything with vampires and werewolves in it I find fascinating. So I'm not a snob about books and literature. I will read anything that I can get my hands on. So I can talk about that if you're interested. I know England and English culture very, very well. So I lived most of my life there. I've travelled all across England and Wales with my jobs. I've been to pretty much any big town in England. I've been there and seen the sights and done the touristy things. I've always been fascinated by history, so I know quite a lot about the history of England and the history of Europe as well. So I can talk about lots of different things. Anything you're interested in, feel free to ask me any questions you like, okay?
Come on. Who's the first one? Who's the bravest?
The beer in Kharkiv is wonderful, yeah. Yeah, it's not as good as English beer, but then nowhere in the world has beer as good as English beer. But yes, I found quite happily surprised that there are quite a lot of what I would call decent bars with decent beer. In Kharkiv, so as you can tell from my profile. So I like to go, especially on a Saturday. When I finished here, I will go to a pub in town so I can watch English football on the TV and drink beer, and my wife can have a nice quiet day without me for a couple of hours while I'm watching English football and drinking Ukrainian beer and eating sala. I love sala. It's one of those things. It's an untranslatable word. There is no English word for sala. It just is sala, isn't it?
Not bacon.
We don't have it. It's not bacon though. It's different. It's different. English bacon is completely different food. Sala is. We don't have anything like it in England. There's something similar in Germany, and I'm sure there are other Eastern European countries that have something similar. When we got married last year, two of my friends came over from England. They'd never been to Ukraine before. They didn't really know where it was. They didn't really know where Kharkiv was, but they wanted to be at my wedding. So they were nervous about coming here, as you can imagine. And they'd obviously done some research on the internet, and they'd read about sala. Now, when it's translated on an English website, or in a menu, or in a guidebook, it's usually translated as fat, which is zhir, or lard, which I'm not sure if you have. Lard we have in England is softer, it's like butter, it's like masla. You use it for cooking. You would never ever eat it. So my friends had this idea from these English translated guidebooks that they were going to come to Ukraine and be fed large pieces of pig fat. Raw, I think. So they were a little bit nervous about what the food would be like. So they were pleasantly surprised when I took them out on the first evening to a Ukrainian pub for Ukrainian beer and borscht and sala. And they actually really enjoyed it. And this was my little bit of promoting Ukrainian culture and cuisine across the world. I've been here permanently for about 18 months now. I moved last summer, last June I moved over here permanently. I've been coming to Kharkiv now for about 4.5 years. start with, I was just coming for short holidays, and then as I was not working so much, I would come for a little bit longer, and I would come for a month at a time when I could have the time. I made a lot of friends here, and then 2 years ago I met the girl who's now my wife, and that made me decide I wanted to live here permanently.
So that was the main reason for your moving to Ukraine?
It was the main reason for moving permanently, yes. I wanted to, once we decided to get married and have a family, then obviously we talked about moving to England, but we decided that we wanted to stay here and bring up the children as good Ukrainian citizens.
Any other questions, guys?
What is your favorite place in Kharkiv?
Favourite place? Home?
Public place.
I like the parks. I like Park Shevchenko. I like the mirror fountain. I love that. That's beautiful when it's lit at night and the fountains are going and the coloured lights on it. I think that's a really beautiful fountain. But Park Feldman, I like. But it's not a pretty city, is it? It's not a beautiful city. It's not a place where you bring people and think, we'll go and see this building or go to this gallery. You have the worst museum in the world, the historical museum.
Really?
Have any of you been there? I mean, apart from when you were school and were made to go, yeah? What do you think of it? Is it? Yeah? And? Is it good? You like it?
I like museums, yes.
Okay.
But it could be better.
Yeah, it could be. It's I think, very old-fashioned, a very old-fashioned kind of museum. I know it's a museum, so it's full of old things, but the way things are presented, it's all glass cases full of dust and quite dark and little handwritten note. I mean, I can't read Russian or Ukrainian, so that doesn't help. And then there's just a piece of rock or a piece of wood or something. It's kind of.
I think that just guys don't know that museums can be interactive. When you visit Europe, you know, yes, when you visit Europe, it's totally interactive. A lot of expositions where you can touch, you can do something with it. Yes, yes, and our museum is different. Agreed.
I mean, apart from Kharkiv, I've only been to Kiev in Ukraine. I've been 3 or 4 times to Kiev. And that's a much more interesting city. There's much more to see and do. It's more historical, there's more beautiful buildings, the cathedrals, the churches, the monastery. But I didn't really like it as a city. I didn't want to live there. Kharkiv, for me, felt like home the very first morning I was here. There's something in the atmosphere. It's impossible to describe the reasons for it. It's impossible to know the reasons. I just immediately felt that I liked this city and this place, and I'm very happy to live here. And it's not the most beautiful place in the world, but it feels like home to me now.
You like only salo or other traditional Ukrainian food?
I like borscht, I like solyanka. I'm not too keen on vareniki, a bit heavy, I think. And some of the other things, what was it called? The stuff with jelly, haladets or something? Yeah. I can eat it if it's put in front of me, but I would never choose it from a menu, if you understand. I think that's one of, you like, I guess it's an Eastern European thing, you like a lot of fat. You know, it's like everything comes with the smetana, doesn't it? Do you want some smetana on that? Whatever you have, bowl of smetana with, or bread with mayonnaise on it, or everything just like
John, you know, we have much more colder winters than you do.
Exactly.
That's the reason, I think.
You just add some fat to
you
something.
You just can't live without it, It's impossible to survive in minus 20.
And I wasn't really keen at pig's ears as well. There's something I have no idea why anybody would choose to eat pig's ears.
Okay.
You say that you like to play cricket. Where you play cricket in Kharkiv?
Oh, not in Kharkiv. Do you have a cricket club here? No. Maybe we can start one. This could be in the summer, English-speaking group. We could go to the park and play cricket. I played a lot when I lived and worked in London. I was never very good. I'm not very good at any sports. I'm just enthusiastic. You know, I'll turn up with my kit and I would usually get a game most days on a weekend just because I was there and was keen. There's something very English about cricket, especially cricket played in villages. They're usually beautiful green areas in a park. You play the game only semi-seriously. You stop in the middle of the game to have tea. You have a couple of tins of nice sandwiches and cakes and things. But it's a very social kind of game, cricket. The game lasts for hours. When the professionals play, the English cricket team is currently playing in Australia, what we call test matches. And this is like the Football World Cup of cricket. It's the most important cricket matches in the year. Those games last for 5 days. So there's guys, professional cricketers playing cricket for 5 days, and thousands, hundreds of thousands of people paying to watch them and live on television as well, of course. I know in Kharkiv you have American football, because I've seen. Yes, I've seen them play. See, I'm a big sports fan. I go and watch pretty much anything. So I've seen the Kharkiv. Can't remember the name of the team, but I've seen them play. I go and watch Metalist almost every game. I go and watch Shakhtar when I can be bothered to leave the house. It's not the same, is it? It's not the Kharkiv team, so.
What about golf? We have to go to golf club.
I've never enjoyed golf. I've tried it a few times, and it always seemed to me a lot of effort. It's incredibly difficult. Do you play? It's incredibly difficult, and always seemed to be a slightly stupid game. But that's just me personally.
So why do all millionaires are playing? They are
Well,
playing golf?
I know in England it's to do with business, and people will have meetings and do deals, and because with golf you hit the ball and then you walk for 10 minutes until you get to go. See, that? What's the point? You hit the ball so far, that's a good shot, then you have to walk to your ball. I mean, it seems a complete waste of time to me. But people talk about business and make deals, and so I've heard. So I don't play, I've never played. The ball's tiny and the club is tiny, and you have to swing it through the air. Just hitting the ball is a miracle. Making it go where you want it to takes a lot of skill. I admire people who can play it well, but I don't want to.
What do you say about Kharkiv winters?
Before I moved here permanently, when I was coming for holidays, I would almost always come in the spring or summer. So when I started to think about moving here permanently, I thought I'd better come in winter. So two years ago, I came in December for a month because I wanted to experience. We don't have temperatures in England like you do here. We don't have snow like you do here. So I've never had that in all of my life. And I wasn't sure how I would cope with it. So I came winter 2 years ago, and while I was here it got down, a couple of days it was -26. So it was colder than anything I've ever experienced in my life. I loved it. I didn't have any, I had to go and buy a proper coat and proper boots and thermals and a scarf and my Ushanka, is it called? The hat? So I'm a proper little Ukrainian now. And once you have everything, I didn't find it a problem at all. It's kind of clean and it's fresh. The air's beautiful, even when it's that cold. It's kind of bracing, isn't it? It's exciting. It kind of fills you with some energy somehow. And the light, when it's white everywhere, when the snow's been lying for a long time, it kind of somehow takes all of the colour out of everything, and it's like watching a black and white movie a little bit. Everything seems, but in a good way. I loved it. I'm quite happy. I don't like the autumn. I didn't like when it was raining and when it's kind of a little bit cold, but not cold enough to wear your big coat, but too cold for your little coat, you know. The in-between times aren't nice. I'm looking forward to next month when we'll get proper snow and proper cold temperatures. And it's funny, I was reading today, we have in England weather warnings at the moment. They're worried because the temperature's going to get down to 0. You know, this is in England. If it gets to -1 or -2, it's cold, and things stop. Trains don't run, buses don't run, people won't drive on the roads because they're scared of ice and snow, and we just don't have extremes of weather in England. We don't have the warm summers that you have, but we don't get the cold winters either. So I'm not used to either of the seasons. I love the summer. I love getting up every morning and thinking, I can just put t-shirt and shorts every day. Warm sunshine, outside walking around, sitting in the park watching the kids play, knowing it's going to be sunny tomorrow as well, so you can plan to go to the beach or go to the swimming pool or things like that. In England, we never know from one day to the next what it's going to be like, any time of year. So I don't mind the winters at all.
Your pronunciation, it's too clear and easy understandable by us. Understandable, yeah. I want to ask you, the foreigners don't, for the foreigners, it's not obvious all the time who he or she met. A Ukrainian, or a Russian. Yeah, a Russian. My question is, how we can easily tell a British and American what is the differences, the peculiarities, except pronunciation? An Australian, a Canadian, just imagine that they are deaf people.
Yeah.
Just maybe in behavior. How we could be sure that you are an Englishman?
You need proofs.
It's very difficult, you're right. English is a universal language, so we have Americans, Canadians, Australians, New Zealand, South Africans. You know, that's five big countries where people...
There's 5 countries, native speakers, yeah?
Yeah, where, you know, they speak English as a native language, but very different. The vocabulary is different. American English especially, there are a lot of different words. The grammar is slightly different. The spelling is slightly different. There are differences in accent and pronunciation, the emphasis they would put on certain words, the way they would construct a sentence. And it's a whole topic in itself. It's very interesting. But then, of course, we have native English speakers who come from, we were talking about this before, India, Pakistan, Jamaica, Guyana, Nigeria, Fiji, again, all over the world, Singapore, Hong Kong, in the Far East. So again, we have ethnic Arabs, Africans, West Indians, Asians. They're ethnically not English, but they speak English as a native tongue. In England itself, we have particularly Indians, Pakistanis and West Indians whose families have lived in England for 3, 4, 5 generations. Chinese people as well. So, but they speak a slightly different English. And London, especially, is a melting pot. You will hear words and conversations in English that you probably wouldn't understand because of the accent, because of the pronunciation of certain words, because of the vocabulary to a certain extent.
What do you say about accent in England? How many accents in England do you have? Maybe more difference from East and West, London and other?
Again, there are very big differences. I mean, to start with, we have England, we have Scotland, we have Wales. I know I haven't answered your question really, and we have Ireland, who have different accents. Now, there's a difference between an accent, the way in which you pronounce the same language, and what we can call a dialect, where you use different words, different grammar, and it's probably less formal. Now, we have within England, although it's a tiny, tiny country, certain parts of the country, particularly somewhere like Newcastle, a big city in the northeast of the country, and Liverpool, a city you've probably heard of, a big city in the northwest of the country, where they speak English, but both with an accent that's specific to their city, but also in a dialect. I had some cousins in Newcastle, they call themselves Geordies. That's the name they give to the people who live in the city. When they were speaking amongst themselves at their normal speed, sometimes I couldn't understand what they were talking about. The accent's very thick, but they use different words. And that can be difficult, and it's remarkable in a tiny country that we have these big differences. And again, it's a subject in itself. So to answer your question, there's no way you could tell. You would meet, if you went to London, you would meet black, brown and yellow people who speak perfect English like what I do. You would meet white people who can barely string 3 or 4 words together. But I'm sure here in Kharkiv there must be people who don't speak Russian or Ukrainian particularly well or clearly. do you have is there a Kharkiv accent? Would you know someone from Kharkiv?
Sure.
Yeah?
Special like what?
Like what? Not что.
Yeah. So that's very different to say someone from Odessa or Lviv or Kiev, yeah?
Have you heard
We have
Russian language in Mukachevo? Russian language? Oh, that's an interesting experience.
I don't speak it well enough to understand the differences, you know, most of it just because I can pick out 1 word in 5 if I'm lucky, so I'm not at the stage yet of being able to recognise an accent or a dialect or even slang words. Sometimes I'll ask my wife, we're watching M1 music channel and they have the lyrics to the songs across the bottom. Oh, what's that? No, it's, you know, it's not a real word, it's slang, or no, that one's Ukrainian, there's a word thrown. It's like, how am I supposed to learn when you just keep changing it all the time?
So no way to differentiate.
No.
Maybe coffee or tea. The Americans prefer coffee. British prefer tea.
I never drink tea. I'm English born and bred and I've drunk coffee all of my life. I very rarely drink tea at all. So no, that's not.
You are not here.
But I've been to America 6 or 7 times and travelled all across. And even in America, obviously it's a huge country, so the regional differences in the way they speak, it's more an accent than a dialect. You don't find many different words. But somebody in New York speaks a lot differently to somebody in Texas, to somebody in California. Anything?
I want to ask about our citizens. What difference in mentality in English? Maybe not in general mentality. For example, you know that American people like to smile every time, every day.
Nobody in this country smiles, do they?
That's true. Particularly in our transport, everywhere with pocket files, files front face. Are you annoyed by this face?
It was one of the things that struck me the first time I came here, that nobody on the street smiles. Now, in England, if I'm walking around, even in London, you're walking down the street or you're on a busy bus or something, and you know, you catch a stranger's eye, just one of those, you're looking around and you just happen. In England, we would automatically smile at that person. It doesn't mean anything, it's just a
Reaction.
Here, people have this. One of my friends described it as the Ukrainian serial killer face. and I got used to that now. But waiting for the bus, marshrutka. I'm waiting this morning for the marshrutka. There's the usual 20-30 people waiting around. No one's queuing. It's Ukraine. Everyone just waits till the bus comes and everyone tires. But everyone's just standing around in their own little zone. If they're with a friend or family, then they're talking to them. But in England, at any bus queue, people would talk usually about the weather, admittedly. Oh, it's cold today, isn't it? Oh, yes. I saw on the news it's going to rain tomorrow. Oh, there might be snow. That kind of stupid, pointless conversation. But English people normally do that, genuinely do that. We'll talk to a complete stranger about the weather. I think English people don't like silence very much. It makes them feel self-conscious. So if you're standing next to somebody or queuing in a shop or the bank, you would just say something completely pointless to a total stranger. But it's just a difference of national characteristic. It doesn't mean anything. You're not going to exchange phone numbers and become friends with that person. It purely is about filling an awkward silence or an uncomfortable situation when people are waiting. And that doesn't seem to happen here. Of course I wouldn't know because I don't speak Russian. So the curse of any non-native speaker, and you'll find this in those of you, has anyone been to England or America or?
Yes.
Yes?
In England.
In England, where did you go?
I have been to England for 12 years ago.
Wow.
I lived in Bognor
Bognor Regis.
Yes, we visited
Wow.
Bognor Regis.
Yes.
Oh,
Beautiful seaside. Yeah.
Yes, Arundel, Brighton, Portsmouth, Southampton,
Yeah.
Salisbury.
Oh, well, Salisbury's beautiful, isn't
Stonehenge. I
it?
visited
Salisbury's a
Stonehenge.
really beautiful city. Yeah.
London,
Good.
many times. I like English people. They always smile and ask, "Are you happy?"
I think it's like every country. There's almost, I think everyone has almost a split personality. You know, there's you as an individual person, how you are, and there's you as a member of, as a Ukrainian in inverted commas, you know. If you ask me about English people as a generality, I would say they don't like foreigners, quite racist, they can be very rude and sarcastic. But when you meet them individually, almost always, and you know, it's not perfect. We have criminals, we have, you know, it's not heaven, but people generally are friendly and helpful, I think, in England. Not so much in London, because London, like Kiev, it's a busy international city. There are lots of visitors all the time. The pace of life is very quick. People on the streets are usually in a hurry to get from where they are to where they need to be. So London tends to be less friendly. But once you get out, and certainly in smaller towns and villages, you'll find people will almost always be fascinated. Oh, where are you from then? And you'll tell them and they have no idea. Well, where's that? Is that near Bulgaria or something, they'll say to you. And then they'll want to know, what's it like? What do you think of England? They ask you that, don't they?
I love England. It's
Yeah.
my favorite country where I was. I visited so many cities. I like culture. I like castles.
Castles are beautiful.
I think England has so many interesting historic castles.
Yeah, I love it.
Arundel is my favorite.
Did you go to Wales?
Wales, no.
No, Wales is full of castles. I mean, there's like 400 or something. It's crazy. For historical reasons. We can talk about that in a future class if you're interested. I can talk all day about Welsh castles. I love them. When I was working in Wales, there are very few big cities in Wales. There's lots of countryside. So I was going to very small offices mostly, and my work very rarely took the whole day. I would go to an office, talk to the people I wanted to, and often 4 hours later I was finished. So, especially in summer, I would take my car and just drive slowly back to where I was going through the countryside in Wales, through the mountains, and visit castles or go to the beach or do something. It was a good job. I had a very nice job.
What age from children go to school and how long they study?
It's about the same as here. They would normally go to what we call nursery school, which is like Sadik. We use kindergarten, the German phrase for nursery schools, and then they go to proper school it depends, 5 or 6, depending on when they were born. Like here, my son's just started this year, his first year at school, so we're going through the traumas of him trying to learn to read and write and count and all of those things. Those of you who are parents will know what that's like. English people then, children have to stay at school until they're 16 years old, minimum. There are some examinations at 16. You can leave after those exams if you choose to, or you can stay for another 2 years to do the kind of higher exams that will allow you to go to university, if that's what you want to do. So you can leave school at 16 or at 18 in England. University then is usually 3 years, sometimes 4, more if you're doing medicine, I think is 7 or something, it depends. But usually 3 years for most university courses. So people will leave school at 16 or 18, or go to university and leave at 22 or something like that. So it's similar to here, I think. It's not a lot different, the system.
In Ukraine and in Great Britain are the sides of traffic. In Ukraine, cars move off right side, and in Great
Sometimes.
in
They're supposed to be on the right.
do you feel this is different?
In England, we drive on the left, which is, of course, the correct side to drive on. The rest of the world has it wrong. We drive on the left-hand side. Yeah, again, that's very difficult as a foreigner. So if and when you go to England, be very, very careful crossing the road. I have to stop and think about which side the cars are on. I make a point of doing that here in Ukraine because, in England, I lived and worked in central London for a long time. So I got used to the London traffic patterns, and you know yourself, you were walking a route you know where the cars are coming from, you know when it's safe to cross the road and when it isn't. It's just something that's in your DNA as someone in the city. In Ukraine, it's never safe to cross the road, I know. So here, I always have to think, right, I'm going this, so the cars are going to be on that side of the road coming from that direction, not from that. So I have to look and think. So I've got a 6-year-old at the moment, I'm trying to teach him, always stop, always look, no over, no over. I think this is good for me really, it's not for him. He's helping me across the road. But yeah, it's one of the many things that England, we just do things differently. We always have done. Traffic in England drives on the left-hand side of the road. It has done for before we had cars. And here the drivers are crazy. The roads are terrible, the cars are terrible, and the drivers are terrible. Really, it does frighten me. I don't drive here. I've driven all over the world. I used to drive around central London a lot, and it never bothered me. Sometimes I don't like being in a taxi here with someone else driving. It can be, there are a lot of very bad drivers, I think.
Aggressive drivers, maybe.
Yeah, very. Yeah, people don't use the indicator lights, they use the horn, don't they? It's like Ukrainian drivers drive like this.
He's right.
It's much worse.
Is it really?
Yeah.
I haven't. I was in Rome a long time ago. I don't know if you've been to Rome.
You're the same.
There's a big monument in the middle of a kind of a circle of roads, and there are pedestrian crossings everywhere, so you can get across to look at them. Like, nobody stops. It's just like it's like a Grand Prix race or something. All these cars just whizzing round and round. I think I stood there for 20 minutes waiting. No, it'd be that way, wouldn't it? So I'm even looking the wrong way. So I'm very careful with the roads here, crossing them, and I don't ever want to drive in Ukraine. I'm quite happy taking taxis when I need to. Marshrutka. I saw. One of the funny things, one of the stories I always tell English people about, what's Ukraine like? It was somewhere, I was at a cafe outside on Pushkinskaya, just sitting outside having a cup of coffee, and a marshrutka was coming along up the hill, and the door fell off. I mean, it didn't just come open, it literally fell off. Luckily, it didn't hit any person or another car, but the whole door was just lying on the pavement. So, of course, the driver stopped and got off, and most of the passengers got off, and we were just standing around looking at the hole in the side of the marshrutka and the door. And it being Ukraine, they just picked it up and kind of, I think they got some scotch tape or something. And off he went with 200 people inside this marshrutka with the door like stuck on with glue or something. That's Ukraine. Exactly. I've got used to that now as well. That would never, it's just impossible that something like that could happen in England. It just wouldn't. And if it did, the company who owned the bus would be sued for all of their money by everybody who was on the bus or who saw it. So
You shouldn't got used to, and we shouldn't got used to such things.
I think you're right, and I think that's, if we talk about Ukrainian culture and Ukrainian society and how it's going to change. That's how it changes. Don't accept that. That's how you need to drive up the standards, and the expectations of ordinary people have to get higher. You're a capitalist country now. People will know that they can make money. You make money by meeting people's wishes. Yeah, that's broadly speaking how capitalism works. What do people want? We give it to them. We charge as much money as we can get away with, but not so much that they can't buy it. But it's only by demanding better things, better service, that once that demand is there, people will provide it. It won't come from the government. It won't come from all the people who are already rich. It will come from middle-class people opening small businesses or starting services because they see that there's a need to be met.
Talking about capitalism, what's your attitude towards Thatcher or her reforms? I've learned about and read about a lot about her reforms and her ruling.
It was a very difficult time in England. I mean, not difficult like it is here. You know, for me, I'm lucky. I come from a country which is very well off. People generally have more than you have here. Things are generally better in material terms, in terms of wages, in terms of infrastructure, hospitals, schools, shops, the cleanness of the air and the water, all of those kind of things, health services, things that English people think of as normal, as their right as a human being. You don't have them here. The Thatcher time was difficult. England was going through a difficult period economically. Wages, there were a lot of people without jobs. And she came and she made some changes that needed to be made, but she was a horrible woman who destroyed things that have taken 20 or 30 years to recover. She was destructive. She enjoyed not just reforming, but completely destroying something. Some of the things she did were positive, and you can't argue with some of those things. You can't argue with the results. But the way she did it, she divided the country in a way that it hadn't been before then. English people had always had generally an agreement about how they wanted their country to be, whether you were right-wing or left-wing. And those, in English terms, those are very mild. You know, we have centre, and our left-wing isn't very radical, our right isn't very radical. Thatcher came on and pushed the whole country to the right. She made a lot of poor people feel unwanted. She made it feel that if you didn't have a job, it was your fault. There was a job there, you just had to go and find it. And we all know that's not the reality of life for anybody in any society. So, while she did some good things, on the whole, I think she was very negative for our country. But then I'm a mildly left-wing and a socialist person, so that's my politics coming through.
What do you think about Brexit?
Brexit. The stupidest decision any country has ever made, ever in the history of humankind. I still can't believe that we voted for it. It's insanity. It makes no sense on any level to me. One of the things when they've analysed now in great detail the results of the referendum, it was quite narrow. I think 52% voted to leave the European Union, 48% wanted to stay in. So it's quite not a lot. Lots of people voted. More people voted in that referendum than have ever voted in the UK before. So it was an issue that people felt strongly about. The majority decision is wrong. And when they've analysed the figures, old people voted overwhelmingly to leave the European Union. Younger people, the people who are the future of the country and of Europe, wanted to stay in. Younger people are less, my parents' generation grew up in the war, what we call the Second World War, what you would call the Great Patriotic War. very different experience for England than it was for the Soviet Union and the rest of Europe. But also a very big event in forming the English character. As I've said before, English people generally are quite racist, you know, we're xenophobic, scared of foreigners, hating foreigners. We never really felt like we are European. English people don't think of themselves as Europeans. You know, we're this island, Europe's over there. We take part in it for things that suit us. We'll, the football championships or Eurovision Song Contest, you know, that's a bit of fun. But this idea of being in an organisation where European people, particularly French and German people, can tell us what to do, it's never been comfortable for a lot of English people, especially my parents' generation. So with the Brexit referendum, a huge majority of people over 60 or 65 voted to leave. A huge majority of people under 25 years old voted to stay in. So again, like Thatcher, the country's been ripped into almost two equal parts, 52%, 48%. So close, you know, it's a few 100,000 people. I'm pro-Europe. It doesn't work very well. It could be a lot better, but it's been, on the whole, it's been a good thing for all of the countries in the EU, in my opinion. But again, that's my class and my education and my preferences coming through here. As well as old people voting for Brexit, stupid people voted for it. So the vast majority of English people who have a degree or higher than degree education voted to stay in Europe. The vast majority of those without any formal qualifications voted to leave. Because they've read their tabloid newspaper or been on the internet and they've been told a lot of lies about, and they're too stupid to see past, that's a horrible phrase, I've been very rude about my countrymen. But on the whole, old people and stupid people voted to leave, and now we have to. It's a tragedy.
So you decided to escape to the country?
Yeah, it was actually one of the reasons. Yeah, I didn't like what it said about my country. I really didn't, and I don't. I'm going to get water all over the place
Yes,
again.
yes, you're right, yes. John, I suggest just to have a 5-minute break because it's very hot
It's
here,
very hot,
impossible to breathe. So I propose to go outside, take coffee or tea, whatever you want, water, yes, 5-minute break. Just we will put more chairs here because yes, people are standing here.